All right. Hello and welcome in, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us as a part of our Spring Career Quest. We're so excited to have you here for today's session. My name is Hong Lin, and I'm a part of the Careers and Professional Development team here at WGU. And today's session is one we're especially excited about, the topic of navigating your career in the age of AI. We are so honored to be joined by Christian Zani, Global Executive Leader at IBM, who brings over 2 decades of experience in executive recruiting and talent strategy. I've had the pleasure of meeting Christian and his wife, Liliana, who is an educational leader here at WGU at our Fort Worth commencement last year, and their impact and support for our community has been tremendous. We're so fortunate to have you here today, Christian. He is at the forefront of how companies like IBM are adapting in tech-driven worlds and how AI is transforming the hiring landscape. So with that, Christian, I will go ahead and pass things over to you.
Thanks, Hong. And it's great to be here. Goodness, you said 20 years or at least 2 decades, and goodness, I feel old. Yeah, so great to be here and great to be with all of you. As Hong had said, I actually had the opportunity to meet quite a few of you at one of the alumni events last fall in Fort Worth, and really enjoyed it. Was super impressed by the event and the size of the event, and just the work that WGU has been doing, not just in the community, but just at the scale it's been doing. You can go to the next slide, Hung. But I'll share a little bit about myself and just kind of what we're doing here. Yeah, so I've spent the last 20 years in technology and talent acquisition, with about 12 to 13 of those years focused specifically in executive search. And so, as Hong had said, I serve as a global executive search leader at IBM, where I work with leaders around the world, essentially identifying and recruiting top executive talent to join IBM. I would say most of the area I focus on is in the consulting services arm of IBM, which is the largest kind of arm within IBM, but we focus on software sales and other areas as well. And over the years, I would say, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, I've had this huge passion around AI. Even though I'm not a technologist myself, I get super geeked out with the technology and how it's really transforming not just the world as it is today, but just really how it's transforming recruiting. And fortunately, I've been fortunate enough to see just firsthand the insights it's having, the impact it's having in my role. And so I just feel like I'm blessed to have this opportunity to be a thought leader in this AI driven space, especially around hiring strategies. And I've even had some opportunities over the last couple of months to be a part of these workforce transformation projects that I've raised my hand for and just be a part of. And so, but beyond just filling roles, I'm a strong advocate for how innovation works and within our practice and how we hire, develop, and grow talent, especially as the demands of the workforce continue to evolve. And so, looking forward to just sharing some of those perspectives with each of you today, and hopefully, some of the things I share to you spark, maybe some ideas around the future of hiring, your career development, and then, hopefully towards the end of the session today, I can answer some of the questions that you might have as well. Next slide, please. So why does this session matter? So as we all know, this job market is crazy. It's changing super fast, and in some cases too fast, right? And so AI obviously is transforming how companies like IBM and other large organizations like Microsoft and even smaller companies are starting to adopt AI and how we hire. So in order to succeed, it's not just about having the right skills anymore. It's about knowing how to stand out in this new kind of recruitment landscape. And so in this session today, we're going to explore how to use ChatGPT, tools like Gemini, Copilot, and others to and especially leveraging things like smart prompts to boost your job search, the power of networking and personal branding, the role of something that's favorite to me and very special to me and very like near dear to my heart is mentoring and coaching, especially in your career growth strategies to prepare for and succeed in interviews. And then whether you're just starting out or looking, looking at to level up in your career, this session is especially designed to give you practical tools and fresh strategies to navigate today's job market with confidence. Yes, next slide, please. And so what essentially are companies looking for? And so AI today is obviously changing how companies recruit. That's by either the way um, by automating how it looks at resumes. So when it screens for resumes, the way it's looking at skills based matching over traditional job titles, behavioral insights from digital footprints, and so what essentially recruiters are using AI to basically quickly sift through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes to speed the process up. And so what that essentially means is that your resume and online presence basically needs to align with the skills and qualities that the algorithms are scanning for. And so how would I shine in today's job market, right? So you have to think the way the bot is going to think, right? So you got to tailor your resume with keywords from job descriptions. You got to build a standout LinkedIn profile. You got to leverage tools like ChatGPT to prep for interviews and generate impactful content. And so as a job seeker or someone that's out in the job market, you really got to kind of embrace these tools like AI to prepare, research, and present yourself in such a way so that you can have a clear edge, right? Um, and in reality, we have those tools such as Google in these search tools, right? To do a quick search and basically say, what kind of prompts can I use to tailor my resume and job description? So the days of flinging my resume over to a recruiter or, just applying to a job blindly and hoping that it sticks is long and gone. And so if you're just applying to 1,000 jobs and, thinking that I'm going to hopefully land something, um, you're really doing yourself a disservice, right? And so you need to start asking yourself maybe some questions like, well, is it my resume? Is it based on my skills? Is it my lack of experience? Am I doing something differently, right? And so sometimes you need to look at what those challenges are. And so maybe I need to start asking some questions, maybe to my advisor, maybe my professor, a mentor, a coach, and asking yourselves, what are some things that I need to be doing differently? Because if I'm not getting the results that I'm looking for, then maybe something's up. And typically, that common denominator, if you're not getting the responses that you're looking for, it's probably yourself, right? And so you also have to think about growing your career in a tech driven world. So my recommendations would be stay curious. So unlearn some of the things that you probably have learned. So, like bad habits and everything else, and then relearn. So, what are those things that I can do to pivot? Um, Such as maybe technology, soft skills, communication, adaptability, critical thinking, investing in yourself, so lifelong learning. What are maybe some certifications that I can be doing? Upskilling is probably a word that you're going to start to hear a lot more and more of. Going to workshops, maybe leveraging peer groups, within your communities or your cities. I mean, there's so many user groups. 20 years ago, we used to call them user groups. So, like if you're a developer, you'd go to a user group. But there's so many opportunities that you can literally just go just about anywhere to find a group that might be aligned to your technical skill set. So, if you're cybersecurity or if you're a network or program management, there's all kinds of groups that you can go out and network with and become a part of. So, your career, like 20 years ago, you kind of had a straight line in terms of your career, but today it's not anymore. So it's by being consistently evolving, you're going to be more adaptable to the changes that come in that are thrown at you. And unfortunately, to this last point, there really is no magic bullet, right? And so every person's path is going to be different, right? And that's feedback that I give my mentees, the people that I coach, that I mentor. It's about focusing on your progression, not perfection. And so one thing I cannot stress enough is that you got to be resilient. Rejection unfortunately is a part of the journey of searching for a job. And that rejection could be one time, it could be 20 times. I get constantly rejected by candidates that I reach out to, by the very clients that I work with. That they're like, they might say, hey, hey, there's candidates that we don't necessarily want to hire. Even when I think they're good candidates. And so, but the reality is, if there's one universal truth I can tell you in the 20 years that I've been doing this, is that resilience is often going to outlast raw talent. You just got to keep showing up, and your attitude, your ability to be coached, to be mentored, going to is going to matter more than just your talent, especially early on in your career. Next slide, please. So AI and the new recruitment landscape. So what would a bot do? So this is kind of one of my favorite things about this whole fascination about around AI. So AI, the thing about AI systems is that really it's screening resumes before a human ever sees it, right? And so, and that's the reality of the world that we live in today. So, what is it doing? It's looking for keywords, job titles, relevant skills, even down to the formatting and even the reading level. And so, many times, organizations like IBM, large organizations, even small organizations today, we work on platforms called ATSs, or applicant tracking systems, that basically will run that process through and essentially will score a resume. So when you submit your resume, it's not often up to the first line of person like it used to be, like a recruiter. It's typically going to be a bot. So the bot essentially is looking for alignment between your resume and the job description. So in reality, you got to think like a bot. And so as I was mentioning earlier, by leveraging tools like ChatGPT, you got to, one of the recommendations I would say, or kind of one of these nuggets that I would say, if there's any kind of takeaway that I would say to take away today, is copy and paste the job description and put it into ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, how should I reflect my resume against this job description? Now, by no means am I telling you to lie on on your resume, and by no means am I telling you to be someone that you're not. Obviously, you want to be able to speak to the very things that you do as a professional, but you're trying to work the system in a way that you are making sure that the bot is going to be able to align, you know, your resume and the search that you're essentially applying to. But in order to essentially leverage the search and leverage the keywords that the bot is looking for, you also got to make sure that it also aligns with the things that you're applying to, if that makes sense. And so keep it clean, keep the formatting clean, avoid complex graphics on your resume. If the system can't read it, it's obviously not going to be able to rank you. And we can kind of touch on this if anyone has questions around that part later on. Recruiters basically are leveraging AI to proactively find talent as well. So you gotta think about keeping yourself discoverable as a candidate. So AI is not just looking at your resume; it's also analyzing public profiles such as LinkedIn, portfolios. At IBM, we have a team of researchers, which they're amazing. They're going above and beyond what typically AI is even doing. But AI is also, going out and trying to uncover people who might have more difficult skill sets to go out there and find. And so just by putting your job title out there is not going to be enough. Have the right buzzwords in your resume, have the right skills. If you're a cybersecurity person, or if you're like a program manager, or if there's certain projects that you worked on, or certain skill sets that you might have, or certain projects that you might have worked on, make sure that you're including all those things. Even if it was like a one-time thing that you worked on, make sure that you're including all those things, because you want to ensure that those things are being captured in terms of your profile. So again, they're scanning things like LinkedIn, GitHub, and again, it's not just about the title; it's about the right skills out there. Um, Now, when it comes to interviews, let's say you've already submitted your resume, you get that first response from the system. It's either um, a recruiter that says, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we're interested in talking to you." Okay, great. But now the first line is an actual bot, and so a lot of times you have to do like a 15-minute, maybe a 30-minute interview, and you're just like, okay, well, what do I need to do? A lot of these interviews are also going to be bot driven, and so typically these bots are going to be looking for your tone, your pacing, your word choice. Some of these tools are going to be assessing things like confidence, communication, consistency, and they're also scoring you. So it's crazy, because 15, 20 years ago, I would have never dreamt that we would be in an age like this where even like a bot is actually interviewing a candidate. But a lot of times, they are looking at how your speech clarity is, your energy level, how authentic you sound. And so again, you don't want to lie, you don't want to kind of come off as inauthentic, or trying to game the system, but it's about how you prepare, the tools like leveraging like ChatGPT. So do your research about the company. Maybe try to, again, it's all about how you show up to the interview. So you can practice with a friend, a colleague, former or like former whatever, or like, let's say, a roommate or family member for that matter. um, but by being prepared for those things, and by doing the research on that company, you at least are showing up, and that shows, even for a recruiter or even a hiring manager, that this person did the work. firsthand, and that's going to set you apart, differentiate you from the next person, right? And then some of the things that I even like how to leverage AI from, setting yourself up for success. So personalization at scale. So AI, and by leveraging AI to work in your benefit, even from your searches. So, you can set AI in such a way that, based on your online behavior, you're even getting recommendations on your own job searches. And so LinkedIn has this capability, much like how you would leverage your preferences on Netflix or Spotify. So the more data you give it, like your skills and your interests, or even like location, AI has a way or capability of being able to even provide those jobs so that you can get prompts or like notifications on the opportunities that are only of interest to you. That way you're not just like being reactive to apply for a job, that you're actually getting those jobs before other people are even get notified. And so you're already ahead of the game to apply to those jobs. And so rather than being waiting 3 days later to apply to a job when there's already 100 candidates that have already applied to the job, you're first in line. So those recruiters and those bots are already got you at the top of the list. And so again, it's about thinking smarter, not working harder on those. And matching your skills with opportunities. Again, AI works in such a way that's connecting those core and adjacent skills with those open roles. And so skills first hiring is replacing experience-based hiring. Learning platforms such as AI is suggesting career paths based on your skill set. And as I mentioned earlier, companies are shifting away from looking at your past job titles and really focusing on your skills. So the more that you focus on what those skills are, think about highlighting those areas that are transferable skills. So don't be afraid to, you know, go out there, grow, go get certifications, even side projects, even if it's like a project that you worked on at one point. Let's say one of the things that IBM, does in terms of like, we do a lot with different, clients and partners. So for example, one of the areas I support is SAP. Even if you happen to touch SAP on a special project, let's say in your company, include that, because you never know that there could be a company out there that might recognize, oh, you know what, we actually use SAP here. Don't sell yourself short. In other words, is what I'm getting at. So if there's something that you touched on, but you're just like, that may not be a big deal, make it a big deal. Make sure that that's highlighted on your resume somewhere. So, and again, even if it was like a small project or just something that you might think is ancillary, I would say just include it. And then think about faster, and smarter hiring. So again, why is AI such an important thing? Because hiring timelines, are shorter. Even though executive recruiting for me is tends to be a longer and a little bit slower process, matching is more efficient, and because it's much more competitive. And so AI really helps recruiters. But at the end of the day, humans, in my case, I am a human, we still have to make the final call. And so at the end of the day, even though it's speeding up and helping us, the process, in terms of precision and everything else, the recruiters at the end of the day are really out to find the right candidate in a much quicker and a much more efficient way. But the good news is that even though AI is a power system, at the end of the day, it's the relationship between the candidate and the recruiter. So your personal branding is still going to matter. So you're not just a data point. You're not just a number in the system. You know, Ultimately, it's going to be that relationship between you and the recruiter. And one thing I'll add is that, especially in today's market, I know a lot of you have probably felt like you've been ghosted by recruiters or companies, that you've been out through like 15 different interviews and that you've never heard back from the recruiter. Trust me, I've been in your shoes. One of the reasons I got into recruiting is that, the reality is there are a lot of companies that unfortunately have broken systems. They don't have perfect systems. Recruiters are people, sometimes they do forget. Sometimes the requirements change. Sometimes the demand might pivot. Sometimes, us recruiters will get caught in the middle of just, like our leaders won't even tell us why things have changed. And so we don't even know. And so the important thing I'll just tell you is, be professional. Feel free to check in with the recruiter. If someone unfortunately ghosts you, or if you feel like someone's wasting your time, you don't have to go back and work with that recruiter, but just keep it professional, because unfortunately, it is a small market. People do remember. But all I would say is just, continue to move on. Again, going back to my comment earlier about being resilient, just be resilient, just, move on, keep going, continue to apply and focus on the things that you can control as a person and as a candidate. Next slide, please. All right. And so, what do I need to do to stand out in this competitive market? So, first of all, you and your brand. So, what are the things as a recruiter? What am I looking for in these top skills and what is in demand today? So, one, I'm looking for critical thinking, adaptability, data literacy, communication, upskilling through online platforms, which is really essential. I'm looking for personal branding, someone's ability to really tell their story. So, what is, how would I define what do I want to be known for? So, leveraging things like LinkedIn, portfolios, the content to tell, especially, looking at consistency across the resume, you know, their social, such as LinkedIn, and also their ability to be able to speak to it through their interviews and so forth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, leveraging tools such as, Chat GPT, if you're someone who's a graphic designer, or other things, having that ability to be able to speak to that as well. At the end of the day, in a world that is absolutely competitive in a crowded market, you know, you know, your brand is what's really going to set you apart. And so you got to think of this as your professional reputation. So what are people going to say when you're not in a room? That's how I think about it, is like, you know, when I leave, so if Christian leaves a room, what are who's advocating for me? Who is championing for me in those rooms? And so you got to build your brand up in such a way with intention. And so highlight those skills that are in demand, tell your story clearly, and use tools like ChatGPT to help you out, to sharpen, to help sharpen you how to show up on paper, online, and in person. Again, today, you guys have tools and access to tools that I wish I would have had 20 years ago. It's amazing how many presentations I've used just to leverage ChatGPT, and it's fascinating. And I was a journalism major, so with graduated with a degree, so I'm pretty good at writing, but today it's just amazing what kind of tools you guys have today. Um, you and your network. This is something I've been preaching for the last 20 years to people, that it's not what you know, it truly is who you know. So when someone gets laid off, whether you're a senior VP of a large organization like an IBM or a Microsoft or an Accenture or a Google or a small mom and pop shop, the first thing I'm going to tell people, like, who do you know? Like, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, the reality is, you'd be surprised how many people end up getting hired by the people that are closest to in terms of their first connections. So ask like, hey, is your company hiring? Is there anyone in your network that I should reach out to, or is there someone that you can recommend that I should be talking to, whether it's, someone through your book club, church, the gym. It's amazing how many people that sometimes we don't even think about it, and once you kind of, let's say you get fired tomorrow or you get laid off, and God forbid that be the case. After you're done licking your wounds, and you're shell shocked, and you're like, okay, this is the worst thing that's happened to me. Once you kind of get past that, start considering, you might start making a list, even go through your LinkedIn profile of the people that you might know, and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to start sending messages and everything else. It's amazing. You'd be surprised of like how much of there's people within your network that you can reach out before you even start applying to jobs. Or if there's companies that are of interest to you, start looking at who works at those companies, and start sending messages that way, because your network ultimately is going to be your most powerful job search tool. Whether it's classmates, former managers, peers. I mean, again, you don't necessarily have to even have a huge network. You just need a meaningful one. And most job opportunities are going to typically come through referrals. I would say the last 3 to 4 roles that I've hired into were essentially through my network. So don't be afraid to reach out, because people want to help more than you think. And then finally, you and yourself. Stay humble, seek feedback. Growth comes from awareness. So for me, one of the things that I've learned just in my career is that, just asking for feedback. We all have blind spots. So I think that's the big thing, is just asking, hey, what do I need to do different? If I'm struggling in certain areas, we can always be better, about doing things better, right? So by practicing resiliency, as I mentioned earlier, rejection is not a personal thing. It's okay. People are going to say no. There's always going to be someone that's better than you at something, right? And that's okay. What can I do different to be better than that person? Again. So it's just the reality of how things work. Reflect often what's working, what's not. And as a recruiter, what am I typically looking for? Like I said earlier, clarity and communication, curiosity and enthusiasm, cultural fit, acumen. Is there this ability to grow? Like one of the things that we, one of my previous employers, we used to talk about having pointy elbows. Does this person play well in the sandbox? Is this someone that I want to bring into the team? Is this someone I can go out and have a beer with at happy hour? So those are things that, we're always looking for, that, you have to think, is this a person that I can literally, within the first 5 minutes as a recruiter, I have to figure out, is this person I'm going to put in front of my hiring manager and that I want to represent? So take the time, invest in yourself, stand out, not by just being qualified technically, but by being coachable, curious, and adaptable. As I mentioned earlier, ask for that feedback, even if it's uncomfortable. Stay grounded, stay sharp, and just remember, this is a journey. The people who succeed are the ones who keep showing up, learning, and evolving. Again, don't have to be perfect, just be real, genuine, ready, and relentless in just how you show up and connect and grow. Next slide, please. And just to kind of conclude here, as a recap, again, just stay sharp by investing in those micro courses. Do your research. I know a lot of you have gone through WGU, so which again, I cannot stress enough and commend you all on doing that. I think that is, that just shows not just your ambition and your courage to just go out and stretch yourself, because I mean, furthering education to me is where it's at, and in a world where, whatever your circumstance is, it's like, I think it's just something that, as people, we should always be like finding ways to learn. And that's something that, especially with technology, like you have to, because if not, you're going to fall behind. And so learning doesn't end with school. It's especially in industries like tech, it's always continuously evolving. I mean, I was just last week, I was at our Think conference with IBM, and just seeing what we've developed in the AI space with AI agents. It's completely fascinating. I literally saw someone do just literally share how these AI agents, you can literally dictate it to literally schedule your PTO, your travel, and within a matter of seconds. And it was absolutely mind blowing, what AI is doing. The work that we're doing, like with clients like Ferrari and UFC, and and some of these like soccer teams and everything else, just around AI is super cool. And again, I get geeked out on it, not just because it's the clients, but the stuff that we're doing around just to make our clients, lives better. Um, as I mentioned earlier, be resilient, leverage your network, continue to, look at your career, not just in the now, but understand where your career is today and where it's going to be in the next 5 years. If you're not asking yourself that question, you're absolutely doing yourself a disservice. Um, think of taxi drivers and Uber. So taxi drivers never thought that Uber was going to exist. And unfortunately, that was a disruptor. Think about where Blockbuster Video was and where Netflix is today. Blockbuster no longer exists because they could have had an opportunity to acquire Netflix at one point, and they no longer exist because Netflix basically took them out of business. If you're not thinking about where I need to be upskilling in my role, then you're already doing yourself a disservice. And so you need to find things that are going to help yourself grow, whether it's technology, whether it's a skill, whether it's, if you're in roles where you think automation are going to remove your roles in the next 18 months, then you probably need to start thinking about doing something different. And that's just the reality of it. Anything that can be automated, anything that could be made redundant, then unfortunately that's just the reality of the world that we live in today. And AI is probably going to be doing that. I can absolutely guarantee you, just through my experience in the last 18 months alone, I have seen more people laid off in around me because AI has taken over their roles. And that's just me being bluntly honest. Again, tailor your resume around, by using relevant words, clean formatting, using specific language. Again, would an AI recruiter understand this? So ask those questions. Should I rework my resume, try to run it, do some compiling, do some formatting, ask prompts, leverage ChatGPT, and again, don't be afraid to, ask those kind of questions or prompts through that. Um, Be familiar with the different types of styles of interviewing, or educate yourself around that too. One of the things that we typically, utilize is the STAR method. If you're not familiar with the STAR method, it's called situation, task, action, result. It's basically a behavioral interview method, which basically recruiters are typically looking for patterns of success, not just you telling me about, what kind of work you did. In other words, I need to understand what kind of impact you had in your role. So tell me about a time that you had a difficult manager, or and then what was the outcome. So be able to tell your story in such a way that is, articulated well. It makes sense. And then what was the outcome? And then, and really what kind of, whether it was successful. It's, and even if it was something that you failed at, but then you were able to recover from that, that's the kind of stuff that we want to hear, right? And then not just that, but also like show your impact. So if you're saying I led a project, that's fine. That shows some leadership skills, but show me the way that, it's not just your experience, but show me the value that you added. So be very data focused as well. Quantify that. Whether that was like, hey, I led a project, but then I was able to cut costs by 15%, or I was able to, lead a team of 100 people, and this team, was able to save, millions of dollars because of the impact that we had. Those are the things that hiring managers are looking for, is like, what is the impact that this person is bringing to the organization. Stay abreast with the technology and the business trends that are, coming in. Read, stay informed. Whether you have news feeds, read articles, read books. There's in the deck that Hong is going to share with you guys. There's like 3 books in there, but there's some links to some articles in there as well that I've included, that really have some really neat information that you guys can check out as well. The more you're informed, the more you're up to date with information. I think it's always just going to be to your benefit, for sure. And so again, AI is your partner; it's not your competitor. So the more that you guys can just stay abreast with everything, whether it's seeking for feedback, idea generation, it's super cool. Like I said, it's AI is not going anywhere. It's going to continue to. We're literally just at the tip of the spear with what AI is already doing, and it's going to be it's going to be impacting organizations more and more each day. And so, and then finally, just be yourself. Be strategic, be authentic, be forward thinking. Again, the best careers aren't built overnight, but you know by shaping your self-awareness, by having a strategy, by having goals, and just staying true to who you are and your values. Again, that is the person that shows up to those interviews, and by being strategic about who you are, and you guys are going to be successful at what you do. And so at the end of the day, it's shaping your own unique path. And so we don't need a carbon copy of the same people, right? We need your perspective, your experience, your drive, and ultimately your voice. And so that's my presentation, and really just enjoyed this time with you all, and happy to open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you so much, Christian. We do have a lot of great engagement and questions in the chat here. Let me just get caught up. We have one here. You speak a lot of an online presence, but what about those who choose to live with a limited digital footprint? Those who not necessarily like to engage on LinkedIn or social media, are they going to be dismissed by the AI algorithm since there isn't much of a digital footprint?
That's a good question. I mean, so it's interesting because I'm naturally introverted. So if I didn't have to live in this world of like being online, then I totally would. Again, be yourself, right? Be your authentic self. I mean, there's a place for everyone, and so I think, you don't necessarily have to be out there. Whether that's you finding an opportunity through your own network. you know Now if you're in a field where you're trying to be in the forefront of technology, I think it might be a little bit more challenged, because unfortunately technology has to be integrated with a bunch of other things. Or if for example, if you're trying to go get a job at Instagram, that might be a bit of a challenge. But you might prove us all wrong, and hats off to you. But it's not a requirement. There's no one's ever going to tell you to go create a bunch of social media profiles. We all have that freedom and liberty to do whatever we want.
Awesome. Thanks for that question there. If anyone has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute, just simply raise your hand and we'll pass the mic over to you. We have the next question here from Isaac. How can we best position ourselves during career pivots? In other words, we have experience, but not sure how much of it is direct experience that the AI scanner will recognize.
Can you read that again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How can we best position ourselves during career pivots? In other words, we have experience, but not sure how much of it is direct experience that the AI scanner will recognize.
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, that was a that was a question that kind of came up even during the alumni event because I know a lot of people were coming out of, you know, coming out of like being nurses, and kind of going into the tech field. And that is a reality, right? And I think that's something where, working with a mentor, or a coach or someone, in an environment like WGU who might have better guidance or experience in that space, can help you, right? But again, I mean, there's going to be a place for everyone. And so I think, tailoring your resume, or even um, getting yourself, even for example, like internships. I've got a friend right now who's gone really through her career as an educator for most of her career, is now trying to go into this graphic design world. And so, and it goes back to, like, being humble in the sense that she was willing to kind of take a substantial step back to get the experience to become, even just to take on the internship, just so as to just gain the experience, right? And so I think that's just one of those things that, you kind of have to take a self reflection and say, okay, well, this is what I need to do so as to gain that experience. But it's more of like how you position yourself in your career, because if you're just thinking that you're gonna, go and get, a degree in, technology, then, it might be something where, like, hey, I'm jumping into this. Then I think you're also kind of being a little bit naive in the sense that someone's just going to go out and immediately hire someone, right out the gate based on the fact that they have or lack that experience, over someone that does have that experience. And so, I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's just more like how you position yourself. And, and but I do think that there are companies that are willing to, take bets on people who have the years of experience from a professional point of view. um but maybe they just, maybe they just lack the technical experience, and they're willing to kind of take the bet, the or hedge their bets on that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. Another question here. What about if there's a career gap of several years? Can a
Hmm.
career timeline be detected in the ATS system, and how would you recommend navigating that?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad that that question was asked. You know, I don't know how I don't know how ATSs or bots like read that. Um, that's a good question. I really don't know how, like, the bots like actually perceive that. Now, in interviews, especially in today's markets, recruiters and hiring managers understand that, right? I feel like most organizations, we live in a culture and a society where layoffs and reductions in force, and, like, for example, I mean, we're all going through them, and I've seen them probably too many times. In fact, Google was a company that was so proud about not laying people off, and they went through, rounds of layoffs last year. And, and unfortunately, it's just, they exist. And so I think most hiring managers get it. I wouldn't necessarily, lie. Just, just tell people, hey, this, I was impacted by this, a reduction in force, or, my role was, or my group was impacted by whatever. In some cases, because, again, the dynamics of just, again, AI. It's like, I've had friends that are literally impacted, and their whole department was completely wiped clean, because because it was because of automation, and so I think a lot of it's just being able to speak to it in an eloquent way, or just being able to speak to it, and and again, I think most people today understand it, and they also realize that in today's market, it's a very competitive market. I've had friends who have been unemployed for, unfortunately, 12 months. But again, I think it's more how you answer it. So, what did you do? Well, why are you looking for 12 months? Well, I was upskilling myself. I was actually, taking online courses, and so I think it's about how you respond, and trying to keep yourself sharp during those times versus just like, well, I played Call of Duty for 18 hours a day.
Right. Perfect. Thanks, Christian. We have a question here from Margaret. Are there resources that you recommend us to use to think like a bot? I found that a very useful talking point.
Yeah, I think in the presentation there probably is some,
Yep.
there's some stuff in there. Yeah, I mean there's some links. Yeah, like there's, let's see, I think I included a couple links. But if not, I mean, literally, I kid you not, if you go into Chat GPT, and you type in some prompts like about like how should I consider my career, or how, what are some ways I should present my resume in such a way that reflects my career, and or not my career, but yeah, like my experiences. It'll literally provide some things, and it's pretty fascinating. I mean, it literally will give you kind of a boilerplate template of like your skills, and you can then go in and edit whatever it is, and it's pretty cool. Yes, Isaac, those links are clickable.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to send that slide deck out so everyone who attended today will have a copy of that.
Mhm.
Next question here from Margaret. Do you have advice on how to obtain a professional mentor?
Yeah, I love that question. You'd be surprised how close your mentor is without even knowing it. It's really a matter of raising your hand, and the guidance I have received over the years is just kind of looking around and seeing people that you admire, within kind of your network. It could be a professor, it could be, I mean, we could always say it's one of our parents, and stuff like that. But I would try to find someone that that you think highly of, or like whether it was a professor from college, or someone in your community, someone in your church, someone, like, for example, in at work, it could be a partner I work with, or um, we have what we call BRGs, like business resource groups or employee resource groups, that they have, they're leaders within their own right. And typically it's just a matter of just like sending them a note and saying, hey, I really value your perspective on these things. Would you, if you're willing, and time permits, would you be willing to kind of meet with me for 30 minutes, once a month, and by you reaching out, you'd be surprised. A lot of people are willing to meet and volunteer their time. In some cases, a lot of times they might have a bunch of other mentees, but a lot of it's just you raising your hand, and just, but it really is going to require for you to kind of put that work into it and reaching out to them. But then once you secure that person, you know, be prepared to kind of show up, and just try to understand like what you want to get out of it, and just tell them like, hey, I'm looking for some career guidance, and some, because they're not going to give you the answers in life, right? They're going to be able to say, they're going to give you some things to kind of contemplate and think about. But if that's not a place to get someone, and you're not comfortable in doing that, there's a lot of organizations that are out there that, like, that I'm sure if you just did a quick Google search, that you could find communities that are out there, whether that's I mean, even through, like, I mean, all kinds of organizations that are out there that kind of specialize in that, um, where people are just literally willing to volunteer their time. But try to look for like corporations, or like whether it's if it's like where there's women leaders, like executives, but people who are based within those kinds of communities. I mean, you'd be surprised if people are just willing to volunteer their time.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Christian. Next one we have here is from Jeremy, and I think the question is around maybe is there such a thing as too much upskilling? So Jeremy shares, I've upskilled past the point of being hired at entry level roles. 3 certs from GCP, one from AWS, both GCP Global Build Partner and North America Service Partner. Have 6 more in cloud provider certifications at the end of my degree. Despite all that, I haven't gotten a single interview, over 100 applications, only been applying to entry level tech support roles, but don't have a degree yet. Any insight or advice you can share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, that's always tough because I think it's more about what is your end goal, right? Like in terms of your career. And I'll kind of give you an example of a scenario when we were doing some campus hiring at one of my previous employers, and this may or may not make sense, but this is kind of the first thing that popped in my head. But we had this individual that was essentially kind of came in, and he was wanting to kind of go into application development, but during the summer, um, he was interning at a grocery store. And one of the things I was telling him, I was like, oh, well, why are you taking a job at a grocery store? Why are you not trying to intern at a place where you can focus on essentially what aligns to your career, right? And so I guess the point I'm getting at is that it's more about going after an opportunity, like if the certs and the things that you're literally going after, they truly align to the things that you're trying to pursue in terms of your career. I would say try to stay on that focus. So if it is like hybrid cloud, that's the only thing I would say that you're going to stay focused on. It sounds like you are, like with AWS and some of these other things. But if it's the degree component of it, I mean, most companies today aren't necessarily hung up on degrees. I mean, I would probably take and I'm happy to look at your resume if it's something that you want to email over to me. It could be that. It could be also where you're just applying to, but it also could be the market that you're in, and that could be another thing too. 100 jobs seems a little bit crazy that you're applying and you're not getting any responses. So I was kind of look at like what's the common denominator. So is it your experience? Is it the lack thereof? Is it the certs? But it doesn't sound like the certifications are there. So I don't think upskilling is always going to be something that is the issue. So I'm always happy to kind of take a look at that. But I think at the end of the day, it's like as long as your skills and your certifications, I guess the whole point I'm getting at is that it really is aligned. In other words, you're not just getting skills just to get skills, right? So that your resume looks like you've got a bunch of things on your resume, right? Like in other words, like you've got a bunch of stickers on your car just for the sake of it. That you're being intentional about what you're doing and what you really want to do for your career. I think that's kind of the whole point I'm getting at.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. And as Margaret commented on it, that is a very impressive background. So continue to press forward. And we also have career services resources. You can always make an appointment with a career advisor. They'll be happy to kind of walk you through any questions that you might have too. Next one we have here. I have a question of maybe you can provide some insight. Was trained as a software engineer with a degree, worked as one for a few years, became a tech executive at a startup, have then very diligently tried to go back to software engineering, but has been told by executive that their executive experience makes them a flight risk. One of the reasons I came to WGU to get a BS in SWE, hoping that would help. Do you have advice for people who want to switch from executive roles to something else?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's everyone's journey is a bit different, um and I think in today's world, it's how you tell the story. uh I don't know. It drives me crazy when I hear people that they say like someone's a flight risk, because again, you're bringing a wealth of knowledge that other people aren't going to be bringing, and so if someone is concerned, that you're going to jump after a couple of years or whatever that is, who's to say that, right? It's like them, do they have a crystal ball that we're not aware of, that that you're again, that we're just not aware of. And so I think it's more of, it might mean that, you know maybe hedging your bets on a smaller organization versus like a larger organization, just so that you can kind of get your foot in the door in a way that you can kind of create a little bit more stability. So and that just might be to kind of get yourself back into a place where you're like, it might be the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, because that is the reality of some organizations. They want to see that stability. And it's, I see it at the executive level, where I've seen people who have been partners for several years, and then all of a sudden they went back to being a senior manager. And yeah, the reality is, as a recruiter, I'm like, okay, what happened here? Why did you get, for lack of a better term, demoted? And in some cases, I've seen it, where, but it really is up to the person. They literally tell me, hey, it's because I had a family issue. So a lot of it's also the story, right? And so I think it's also going to be kind of contingent on how you tell that story, and like why did you take that journey. So when you do speak to the manager, make sure that you kind of have that part buttoned up, as to why you did it. And so they've kind of got that warm and fuzzy as to like, well, I'm not going to jump ship. This is what I'm trying to do. This is kind of where I want to be at. And I want to hang my hat on, with this company for the next 5-10 years or whatever that is. And so I think it's going to be more of you giving them that confidence that they need, right?
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, Christian. We'll just give it another minute here. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to send that through the chat or raise your hand. If you do think of a question later on, no worries. You can always email us and we'll make sure that gets through here. And then, Christian, if it's okay, could we share your LinkedIn out to the attendees today and have them follow
Yeah.
you? Okay,
Yeah, happy to.
perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, feel free,
Awesome.
feel
So
free to add me. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll make sure to share out that slide deck, and then along with Christian's LinkedIn, I know he posts some good articles and good insights via LinkedIn as well. So I will also drop our survey form here. You can take a minute or so to complete that. But it doesn't look like any question, just a lot of good thanks. A lot of I've already followed you. So let's see. One here, any other hiring events maybe for IBM or events this summer?
I would just make, definitely. I mean, you can go to our careers page. I mean, I know we're consistently hiring. I think the careers page is www.ibm.com/careers. We're continuously hiring in all kinds of areas, be it AI. I mean, it's an exciting time. I mean, for IBM, whether it's in artificial intelligence, whether it's quantum, it's crazy, the stuff that we're already seeing, um, as well as we're hiring people in like the software sales space as well. So definitely check, take a look at that. And then we just announced last week the launch of our Linux 1.5 tower. That's it's crazy. It's already got the capabilities for AI, as well as the security aspects for quantum, which that in itself. I mean, read up on it if you haven't read up on it. Just the ability for like encryption and everything else and protection is pretty cool too. So but yeah, it's definitely exciting times. And so, but cyber is another area that I think we're continuously hiring. And we do have internship opportunities. I don't know much about the internship area, so I would just say depending on what city you live in. I do know that we've kind of moved away from you know, because we are hiring in specific cities based on like kind of our, yeah, Atlanta is actually a big office. But I know like Austin's another big office, and there's some sort of specific geos that we're now targeting. I know like RTP or Raleigh, North Carolina is like a big location in New York. Um, but let's see, last question. I don't mind. I don't if I missed about or I didn't see that. I think there's a question in there.
Yep. Do you think AI will take take over some entry level positions?
Um, I guess, I mean, it would depend. Like where I see AI taking over is the stuff that can be automated, right? So anything anything that like if you think of like scheduling, like anything that's like redundant paperwork, like anything like I don't know, like I think about my job like for example, we have to schedule interviews with our partners. Like that's going to be gone. I mean it's already going away. Um, you know, and like Arvind Krishna, our CEO, basically announced last week that the money that we have essentially have saved by, however you want to call it, slice it or dice it, but like the money that we saved by like laying people off because of artificial intelligence was about $150 million. But that $150 million, we've essentially reinvested it and put it back into um, the development of AI and other things. And so, but a lot of those roles were essentially roles that where it was basically paper pushers, right? Things that were people like, for example, in HR that were doing benefits, or they were doing like we developed a platform called Ask HR. So rather than me going and calling a person and saying, hey, I need to do something with my payroll, or hey, I need to do something with this, well, that person no longer exists. I literally can type in this prompt and the bot can do it for me. So it's those kinds of things that those are going to be long and gone. I mean, internships I think are always going to exist, but I think it's going to be more like but for example, coding, right? Like right now, one of the things that Watson X, which is another platform that we launched about a little over a year and a half ago, we've now have the capability of taking old code from our clients and literally run it through and essentially modernize that code like that. Whereas before we used to have programmers, which might have taken them months at a time to basically take that old code and modernize that. And so that is the power of AI. So now what it would have taken months of a project, it literally takes seconds. So that's the kind of stuff that you're going to start to see more and more of.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and conclude today's session. Thank you all for joining us and for being a part of such an engaging conversation. Keep an eye out in your inbox. We'll do a follow-up email with the recording, with the slide deck, and then also Christian's LinkedIn page for you to follow as well. We do have that brief survey, which is only 2 questions, and we'd love to hear your thoughts so that we can continue to bring these great events and connect you with industry leaders. And of course, we'd like to give a big WGU thank you to you, Christian, for sharing your time
Cool.
and such valuable insights with the WGU community. Your perspective on how AI is shaping the talent acquisition and all of your practical tips on navigating today's job market were incredibly insightful. And your passion and leadership for helping others grow truly shines through. So we're so grateful that you were able to spend today with us.
Of
Thanks
course.
again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at future sessions. Wishing everyone a fantastic rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Yep, take care. Bye.